Hi everyone and welcome back to another video with me, Shruti. You're watching Living Our Ascension. This is basically going to be a series of videos that I do on astrology. And, because what happens is that, astrology is one of the tools that I used along my process of ascension and enlightenment, to really come into myself. And as you might know, one of the most important things about ascension is know thyself, is coming into a knowing of what you are at a soul level. And astrology was one of those things that really helped me. And certain aspects of astrology more than others, because you could really get into astrology into lots of details, but there's certain aspects of it that I wanted to speak about that are more important than others perhaps for the ascension path. And one of these things is the placement of the north node of the moon. And I really wanted to make this video especially for those of you who are perhaps haven't delved into astrology yet, or you don't know, you're beginners. And that's fine, because I'll be showing you how you can calculate it yourself. It's actually not like a calculation. You just have to see what sign it's in, what house it's in, and then you just need to listen to my explanation for it and see if it gives you some tips. Because I remember that, the position of the North Node, it shows us what our destiny is in this life, but it also shows us, those areas of our life where we fall the most, perhaps which are the most challenging for us, areas that are quite unknown. It can often show us where we have addictions, the challenges that we have, and those are actually the areas that we are really obsessed with. And that's why when we don't get it in the moment, we sort of cling to the lower aspect of that energy, and we that's where the addictions come in. And but once we know what the higher aspect of that same energy is, then we can use it in a more productive way, and that actually becomes our destiny. The North Node is the North Node, so basically, is not a planet, like you have the sun in a certain sign, you have the moon in a certain sign. These are all physical planets. But the North and South nodes, they represent these points. They're just points in the sky. And you can say that that's where a certain high level of energy comes in. So it's kind of like, the energy is higher than what the planets represent. So even though they're not physical, they actually represent the point of, if you look at a person's life and you see that they went through the process of enlightenment within themselves, and you see how they did that, like what events caused that more specifically, and what realizations then led them to do that, like what were the main themes. One way that you can see that is through astrology. And so the position of the North and South nodes can really show us that. So I hope that it is with that end that I'm making this, that I hope that this can help you. So if you're subscribed to this channel and you see 12 different videos, because there's 12 positions in astrology depending on what sign it's in, then that's the reason why that I'm putting out so many. And I don't plan to put out lots of different astrology videos, so don't worry about it. It's it's not going to be an every day or every week thing. If you see lots of videos uploaded at once, that's the reason why. Or there might be one after the other, I'm not sure yet. So if you're watching this and this is not your sign, just wait for your sign to come. And so what I'm going to do is, first I'm just going to give you a little bit more of the introduction, and especially you need to check which house and sign it's in, so that you can then find that video on my channel related to that house and sign and listen to those two videos. So what you need to do is, if you don't know, if you already follow astrology and you already know, you follow a certain house system, because in astrology there's different systems, house systems, which can, and depending on which system you use, the sign, not the sign, but the house position most likely of your South and North node can be different. So if you already use astrology, then you can use whatever house system you use. That's fine. You can listen to my interpretation for it. But if you don't, then I follow the whole house system, and I really like this system. And it's also the simplest to understand as well, so it's quite easy. I will explain it in just a second. It's not hard, so don't worry about it. So what you need to do is click the link below this video. When you check the description below this video, you'll see a link to a website where you can go and you can enter your birth information, and it'll generate your astrology chart. And on that astrology chart, then you can check your north node, where it is. And so the information that you need before you go to this website is your birth date, the place and the place of birth, as well as the exact time of birth. So if you don't know your time of birth within like 10-15 minutes, if it's not accurate, then only check the sign of your north node, because the sign should remain the same, no matter, as long as you have the day right, the birth day. But the time, changes the house that it's placed in, like where on the wheel it is. If you don't know your birth time, then just listen to the video for the sign. So for example, my north node is in the sign of Taurus, and it's in the 11th house. But if I don't know my time of birth, I will just look at north node or Rahu in Taurus, and I won't really check because I don't know which house it's in, because I don't know my time of birth. But if you know that your time of birth, which should be most of you, and this needs to be accurate, so check it from like a birth certificate or another kind of official document. If you know your birth time, then enter that information, and you'll know which house it's in as well. And then listen to 2 videos then. So first listen to the house video, and then listen to the sign video. And I've drawn a chart here that I can show you an example. When you go on that link and you enter the information, one of the charts on that page will be a circular one like this. So check the circular chart and look for this RA. This is Rahu, or it's also called the north node. In Vedic or Indian astrology, it's known as Rahu. The north node is known as Rahu. And the opposite is Ketu. Ketu is the south node. And south node shows what our past has been like, what our default patterns are. And Rahu shows what we are coming into, what our destiny in this life is, what purpose we are here to fulfill. So now, as you can see, we're going to focus a little bit more on the north node, because that is what we need to fulfill, and the south node is basically what we're leaving behind. So you'll see me mention this much more, but this whole axis is important. So the Rahu or the north node, for my chart, is in the sign of Taurus and is in the 11th house. And how do you know this is the 11th house? Is because the first house is always this one. If you look on the chart, on the western side, it'll be over here on the western side. This is the first house always on a circular chart. So mine is Cancer. So this is 1. You always count the first house first. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you get to 11. So this is the 11th house. So my north node is in the 11th house. And like I said, it's in the sign of Taurus. So here I've written down, so write down these 2 things, that north node or Rahu is in the 11th house. So this is the video I'll see first, north node or Rahu in 11th house. The video I'll watch second is north node or Rahu in the sign of Taurus. So these are the 2 videos now that I need to watch. So once you go on this website and you have this figured out, you write these 2 things so that you don't get confused, then you can watch these 2 videos. And if you have any questions, if you're watching this video, you have any questions, you're confused, let me know in the comments below, and I'll try and help you out if I can. And now let's begin, with a little bit of explanation of what the north and south nodes are, and then I will, proceed to the position. So the south node in astrology is known as, our past. If you believe in past lives, it shows us what kind of a past life we had, what we were in our past life. If you don't believe in past lives, then it's something that the past that we have had in this life, our childhood, when we were growing up, let's say like the first 20-30 years of our life. And the north node then shows us what is our actual destiny in this life. And the south node, representing our past, shows us what we're good at. It's something that we are quite good at already, that we have established ourselves in. Imagine like if it's like a past life, we've actually done that already. It's something that we have are quite mature in, but that doesn't mean that we have fully mastered it. And then how do we master it though? It can be an area in life, the South Node, where we are a little bit dissatisfied. And how do we make that complete? How do we become satisfied in it and become fully complete in that life, in that area of life, is if we develop where our North Node is placed. So we are, lots of astrologers say that you need to let go of the position of where the South Node is, like whatever the South Node represents in your life, let go of that area and only focus on the North. It's not really exactly like that, but the thing is that wherever your South Node is sitting, you just need to it's something that comes easily to you, that you can fall back upon, but there isn't as much of an dedicated effort needed in that area of life, because if you overdo that, then it becomes stagnant. So how it will expand is when you go towards what the North Node represents, and then not only will that area, unknown area of the North Node of your destiny flourish, but also this area that you are good at but have not fully mastered, this also becomes mastered. So the two opposite ends come together, and that's when transcendence happens, because that is how we transcend duality. So all of us in our heads, in the beginning, we have why we haven't become enlightened yet is because there is some part of us that considers something as good or bad, weighs this one as better than the other, and the other is not something we have fully gone into, we haven't fully embraced. So when we actually go in this direction of the North Node, we fully embrace it in a grounded way, in a way that's not ungrounded, or trying to do it in a quick way, in a superficial way, but we actually delve into it there. And this is something that, where the South Node is, we're quite developed in it. When the two of them come together, then both of them grow. It becomes that yin yang, that balance, and that means that through that area of life and the struggles that we've had within it, and then the realizations, we transcend. So when we truly do that, that's when the enlightenment process happens. And if you check the charts of people who perhaps have reached a certain level in their enlightenment, you can see that, the events that happened in their life that caused that, both the problems and the transcendence, a big part of it is related to this axis. So this is the axis, according to me. I've never read this, but according to me, this is how we transcend duality. So that's our life purpose in this life. You might have a certain job, like let's say you're a teacher, or let's say you're a doctor, because the sign of Virgo is a doctor. Let's say your sun is in Virgo, or you are a doctor, but that doesn't mean necessarily that you came into this life to become a doctor. It's just your job, it's what you do. Let's say your North Node is in another sign that represents being a pioneer or something, then your main purpose was to become a pioneer, to do something in a new way, to really develop that, to forge new paths. And because your sun is in Virgo, you do that as a doctor. You could have easily done that. If your sun was somewhere else, you could have easily done that being a pioneer, being a teacher, being, a homemaker, whatever it might be. But the main purpose for which you incarnated in this life was not to be a doctor, it's to be a pioneer, to do things in a different way. It's just an example. So it shows us, the position of our North Node shows us what is our destiny in this life. It's always an area that is the most darkest in our horoscope, that we don't know. That's the unknown region. It represents our unknown. The South Node, our past, represents the comfort zone, the default patterns that we keep going back to. And then what happens, like when we keep doing something that we have done, it becomes boring, it becomes redundant, there's some stagnation there. And the only way that it can expand is if we open up new areas of life, and then we bring those skills, then they merge with something we already know. So that's what the North Node represents. And where we have the North Node, it's actually this really high vibrational energy, and we will be doing things in a very different way, in a more eccentric way. And we can be quite eccentric with it, which I'll explain through every sign that when we do that. But what the North Node represents, is also something that when we first go into the unknown, like when we go into the darkness, the dark forest, we're going to fall down a few times. We can't see anything. We're not familiar with that space. But it's something that, really draws us in. It's the mystery. It's the most mysterious thing, and it's like we can be obsessed with it, with that area of life, and we really want it. We desire it, But when we go into it, we can first latch on to the more superficial things that it represents, and those become the main obsessions in our life, the main personality, defects, quote unquote, even though there's no as such defects. But those become the most problematic areas in our life often. But when we learn to see what the higher aspect of that same energy is, and we put our efforts there and we keep going it, because in the beginning, when we try and do it the right way, something, instead of grabbing onto this more superficial aspect of it, when we go deeper into the unknown, into the darkness, we will fall quite a few times. So it's really important for us to be on that path, to keep at that path. And the North Node is said to mature around the age of 42 or 45, and that's when we truly learn, after falling down quite a few times, the lessons of what it represents. But if you are on the path of enlightenment, of ascension, this can happen much before. You don't have to wait for that default time of 42 and 45. Perhaps things will become more grounded at that time, but you can really accelerate your journey as well. So I don't want to keep speaking about this and make this too long, but that is what the North Node represents. And when you combine this North and South Node axis, this becomes transcendence. And I'll be speaking about, depending on your placement, what that axis is for you and what you need to unify, and the negative experiences that can happen, as well as how you can transcend them, and what the positive side of that is. And in the comments below, please let me know if you resonate with this, what particular challenges you've gone through. Let us all know. And finally, I also want to say that I have astrology readings on my website as well, so please check them out. They are relationship readings, because relationships are another aspect of life through which we find out what we are as a soul, because all the relationships that we meet in our life, they reflect our own soul. So it's the beloved path, and there's lots of people out there who are looking for their soulmate, their twin flame, and that's what this reading is all about. It shows you what kind of partners come into your life, at a physical level as well, what their qualities are, but also at a higher level, what that union, that marriage looks like, and it shows you what that union with yourself looks like, so it brings insights into that. They're very interesting codes. So that's one of the readings I have. It's called Soulmate Astrology Codes reading. And then the other reading I have compares two charts. So for example, your own chart, and if you have a partner. So if you're single, you can go for the first one. It'll bring you insights into your default patterns as well. What holds you back from fulfilling relationships, what your default patterns might be, anything in the way. Because when we come into that conscious awareness of it, then things start to change, and then we draw partners that represent that higher energy instead, for more fulfilling relationships. And the other reading that I have compares two different charts. So for example, you and your partner, you give me their birth information as well as yours, and I compare them and speak about the dynamic of this relationship, when the two energies come together, what the clashes are, what the problems can be, and how you can transcend them, as well as what the higher union looks like because the highest union that we can have on this planet is of service. You are here to serve at the end of the day. You are a creator being, so you are here to create something. You are here to serve yourself and all of creation. And when two people come together, they can build something that is even greater than what they can do individually to create, to serve. And there's charts that are not just the main astrology chart. There's these divisional charts in astrology as well, and all of them can things like that can show what that purpose is, what our higher purpose is. So when we know that, we come into it it ourselves first, and then we draw partners that represent it, and so it becomes that actual soulmate union, and not just, you know, any random physical partners that we might have that only fulfill us at a socio-economic level, but also at the higher level. Anyway, so those are the readings I have on my website. Please check them out in the astrology services section of www.livingourascension.com. You can find the link below this video. And now let's move on to the sign position. So if you have Rahu or the north node of the moon in the 12th house or in the sign of Pisces, then this video is for you. So, you know, if you have this position, that means that the south node is in the opposite sign and house, which means that your south node is either in the 6th house or in the sign of Virgo. And I want to speak about this position first because it relates to what the past has been like, what our comfort zone is. And then, you know, as we move on in the video, then I'll get to the north node, which shows what you need to do now and what, you know, kind of like you can say the future or the life purposes. So with the south node and your past being in the sign of Virgo or, you know, in the 6th house, that shows that this is a person who is very, you know, they are very good at being structured, at having routines, you know, at managing details especially of things. And it depends on, you know, for example, if you have the south node in the sign of Virgo, but you know, it depends on which house it's in, and you'll be very detailed with that particular life area, for example. But inherently, you know, because you have the south node here, that means that this is also your default personality in a way. You know, it's a large part of your personality, of your core personality. So you kind of tend to be this kind of a person who's very much about, you know, very practical, very much about managing the day-to-day, very responsible with it often as well. And, you know, Virgos are those people who are you know, they are all about fixing things, and they see all the details you know, very clearly, and they notice all the details more than like most people. And, you know, then they have to like fix it and keep it like in an orderly fashion. It doesn't always mean that they're neat or something like that, but there's an order in their head, and they need to have it, you know, in the external as well. So they're very good good at, you know, managing things that are of a practical nature, and especially things that require lots of details as well. You know, they tend to be very punctual as well, you know, with time and everything, or at least they value it a lot. So this is, you know, how they tend to be. It's all about, for them, because Virgo or the 6th house rules daily routines. So these people are very good at that, you know, at managing that, like being on top of things related to that. So it's like about, you know, daily routines, and it also rules like your practical tasks that you do every day, the job that you do as well, because work is related to this house, you know, like when you, especially if you go for a job and you go to work, the things that you're doing, you know, the efforts that you're putting in there. And also this is one of the more you can say challenging houses. So it's the house of the difficulties of life as well, you know, the kind of the difficulties of life that have to do with survival. Like when you go to work, you know, you have to kind of deal with co-workers and almost like enemies. It's called the house of enemies. It doesn't mean that you will have enemies, but it's just that there's competition, you know. You have a boss to deal with, you have all of these co-workers, and just the daily things like paying bills and, you know, taking care of your work, showing up on time, and all of that is what it relates to. So again, these people are very all about that, about managing, you know, all of these details of life, these practical things, and usually they tend to be quite good at it. But the thing is that because they have the south node here, you know, there's like a boredom with this that can come, and so there's like a withdrawal at one point. So even though they're very good at this, at some point in their life there'll be like a withdrawal, you know, from it. Some sort of a dissatisfaction or something happens where they're no longer kind of, you know, fully satisfied with this, and they withdraw from this. And what they want to do, because their life mission is about the opposite end, you know, and the opposite end is surrender. It's so while what you know and what your comfort zone is and what your past has been like is about managing all of this and being like, you know, responsible, and the daily routines of life and being on top of that, and the work and service, it's the house of service as well, you know, being like a servant almost, and which doesn't mean that you have to be a servant like a maid, but you know, kind of like showing up for like people show up, you know, in a humble way, like this is the task that they do every day, whatever kind of job you might have. But it also rules, you know, people who are in the service profession, like for example, you know, even like things related to the earth, you know, like volunteering, and like the people who go and they volunteer and they clean up, you know, the beach and stuff like that. So service related to that, very humble things that are related to you know, being a servant in that way. The highest servant that you can be on this planet is to serve Mother Earth. So that all of these things are very related to this house. But like I said, there's a withdrawal from this, and their obsession is the opposite side, which is you know, the house of the Pisces, or the 12th house, which is, you know, that house is really hard to describe, but I'll try my best. So it has to do with like retreats and holidays, you know, spiritual activities, everything that opposite of what the 6th house is about, which is about daily responsibilities, being responsible. The 12th house is about retreating from the world, from the practical mundane world, and going into like retreats, you know, foreign lands, holidays, and kind of the more negative side of it can be escapism, putting things in your body like alcohol, you know, things that help you to escape the mundane world. But then, and that can be the thing with this position, that, you know, the first time that you, because you're obsessed with that surrender, you really want it, like you've had this control your whole life and you may be good at it, but you know, you're kind of, in a way, you can be fed up of it, and what you really desire, your soul craves, that's a deep surrender, and you know, just relaxing into your soul. And often when we want to do that, we can first, because we haven't explored it properly yet, so we can cling to the first more easy way of bringing that about, you know, instead of fully actually properly surrendering. And some of the easy ways of surrendering, of escaping the world and worldly responsibilities and your daily practical routines and tasks and bills, you know, one way of doing that is to like drink alcohol or do drugs, and you know, all of these things that help you to escape. But that's the lower side of the 12th house, so obviously that's not something that, you know, I would recommend. But why I mentioned this is that people, you know, with this position can have that tendency, like sometimes once in a while they'll do this, and this can be the more negative side. But just remember that when you're engaging in these things, what your soul actually deeply desires is surrender, and only when you haven't fully actually allowed yourself to surrender will you cling to these things. And often what can happen is, like, these people will say, no, you know, I'm like, they can have like a workaholic kind of a nature sometimes, and they will or it'll be the opposite extreme, where they just, you know, they want to give up from whatever work they have done and whatever, even like they might have a very stable good job, but they're just like want to give up. So it can be like an extreme. With the Rahu Ketu axis, we go on both extremes, but and they can say things like, you know, no, I'm taking a break and I'm allowing myself to just relax. But these can be the kind of people, they'll go on a holiday and they're still not relaxed, you know, there's still this control mechanism going on. So there's this falsity when it comes to surrendering and relaxing. You know, they still have that OCD in their head and they want to control things and be on top of everything. It's, even if they're physically somewhere else and retreating, you know, it's still going on in their head, that busyness and the need to control. So the keyword for you is surrender. If you have this position, your life mission is surrender, and, you know, truly surrendering. And when you truly surrender on your own in a conscious manner, you know, then because what can happen is when we don't do that on our own, then life can present these situations where we have to. So for example, you know, these are just extreme circumstances, doesn't mean that it has to happen to you, but you know, for example, they've been very responsible with their work and their bills and everything, then suddenly something happens and they lose their job, you know, so they have to like surrender, like, you know, it's like life gives them like a holiday or a retreat, which is something that they weren't taking, for example, or they're kind of forced into it. So that is one way that it can happen, or they get sick or something, and you know, because the 12th house is also hospitals and healing and stuff like that, so they have to do that, you know, or there's just a lot of dissatisfaction in the way that they've lived their life in a more controlled way, and you know, something happens psychologically or with their health, and then they have to they go to spiritual retreats and stuff. So again, that can be in a more forced way. But the idea of learning about astrology is that you can become more conscious about these patterns and what's happening. So so you have the option of indulging in the things you know, that your North Node represents in a more conscious manner. So instead of escapism, you know, through drugs and alcohol, or you know, all of these false ways of surrendering, like saying you're relaxing when you're not, try and make it happen, you know. So some of the activities that can help you is actually going on holidays, but you know, allowing yourself to actually relax there. And then even with this position, especially if Rahu is in the 12th house, not just in the sign of Pisces, but especially the 12th house, because it relates to foreign lands. It's the farthest house from the first house. The first house is your physical body, and then you know, you go and go and go, and this is the farthest. So it's like it shows that the life mission can be about dealing with foreign lands, or you know, even settling there. So there's this foreign element that's there. Then again, like spiritual activities can also help you. That's another thing you can do consciously, you know, all kinds of different retreats, and even for people who are not spiritual. So now I want to give you a practical example of somebody that I know. So for example, my brother has this position, and you know, he has the North Node in the sign of Pisces, not in the 12th house, but in the sign of Pisces. And he, for example, now, you know, works in the non-government sector, and he had this really stable job before, working for a really good, you know, very well-known organization, like a corporate organization, and he even got that job early, you know, quite easily. It came to him like right after college, and you know, yeah, just because he had the aptitude for it and everything. But then that's not where his heart lies, you know, and Pisces is related to charity as well. So now what he found himself doing is, you know, he moved to another sector, which is the non-government sector, and he wants to work with like these different organizations that help, you know, people who are underprivileged in different sectors, whether that's sports, you know, people who don't get a chance in India, who are very talented but don't really make it, don't have the funds to you know, hone their talent, or whether it's people who, like women empowerment, you know, people in villages, women who are treated really badly. So all kinds of different kinds of charity, and this is what he's involved with now. So this is one example, you know, because it can be spiritual, but on a more practical, for people who are more practical, you know, it can be something like this. It looks a little different for everyone, but this axis, like when you have this in Virgo, or the 6th house and 12th house, because the 6th house is related to how we serve on with our physical tasks, you know, like we're physically there like a servant, and the 12th house is kind of similar, like they're both similar. The 12th house is also serving, like it's the house of healing, and that's why it rules hospitals as well, but it has to do with the more subtle aspects of life. So for example, spiritual healing, you know, things that have to do with more mysterious and the mysterious realms, like the non-tangible realms, whereas the 6th house is the very tangible things of life, you know, the mundane. So a person who has their north and south node in this axis has the capacity to really you know, gain from both sides of this and become balanced. And really that's what we are doing with the south and north node. Is the south node where it is, you know, that's our past, it's something that we are good in, but there's some sort of dissatisfaction, and that place becomes satisfied when you go towards your north node and gain more qualities of that. and in your case, you know, this is like I said, truly surrendering. And the highest meaning of surrender has to do with when we just kind of surrender our ego, you know, this the ego, when we are too based in it, it can be all about survival. Like, we are very conscious of the fact that this is a physical body, I have to feed it, I have to survive, you know, I have to pay my bills, and these are all the things that I'm responsible for. And there can be too much of an attachment. When there's too much of an attachment with that, and you don't make time to truly trust that, but there is a higher plan as well, you belong to like a greater you know, universe, and you are part of that, you are one with everything. The house of Pisces, or the 12th house, you know, is the place kind of like where almost like after we die, you know, we go and we kind of merge with all that is, like people say we merge with God, but it's the Holy Spirit realms almost. And so it's that space when we are one with everything. And people who have this you know, like who have strong Pisces, they are very good at that. They are very good at identifying, you know, feeling one with everyone. Like, that's why it's so easy for them to forgive others as well. Like, they see themselves in others. They can be very good actors as well, because they kind of can lose themselves in others, you know. And on the negative side, they can play victims and stuff like that, because it's kind of like they don't know what the boundaries are between themselves and another person. But on the more positive side, you know, this makes for somebody who's just so compassionate and is able to see that everyone is the same, you know, we're all the same, we're all in this together. And there can be a lot of strength when it comes to that. It's a very soft sign, but you know, there's a lot of strength that's there when you belong in everything that there is. You see everything as yourself, you know. There's also this greater belonging that comes from that, and this relaxation also that can come from it, because then you know that you are not the only one responsible for yourself. It's like you are responsible for yourself, but there's this greater plan that you belong to, you know, that also takes care of all of the minute details. And another thing that I want to mention that's important to this, related to this position. So one of the things, if you have your North Node in the sign of Pisces or in the 12th house, these are all the activities that, you know, you might be drawn to in especially in the second part of life. You know, things like you might be a very good actor, you know, charity, and spiritual healing, spiritual retreats. All of these things can greatly benefit you. And also these people, even though they are so practically minded in the first half of life, they actually have really strong intuition. They actually have really strong imagination is the word for them, creativity, because the 12th house is related to those subtle realms where everything blends into the other. And one of those things is imagination, you know, like dreaming, like when we go to sleep, and those other realms that we go into when we sleep. So actually there can be a lot of creative talent that's there, you know, all kinds of different kinds of creativity, whether that's writing or performing, acting, you know, being writing scripts, you know, being a director, actor, you know, whatever it might be. But the key word is imagination. You know, these people have this brilliant imagination. To give you an example, so I'll give you two examples now of people, you know, to wrap this up, that I know of. So for example, earlier this year, like, I went on a date with someone who had this position, and they, for example, you know, because like I said, they if you have this position, your South Node is in the 6th house, which is all about daily routines, being on top of things, and being of service to society through your practical actions. So when they saw me, because at that point I was kind of, you know, not working all that much, you know, like I wasn't even making as many videos, and kind of I was just going through a phase. And you can say that my work and how I am is kind of very Piscean, very 12th house, you know, all about spirituality. And it's like people who are very Piscean, things flow into each other. There isn't so much of a demarcation between, you know, the daily tasks and time slots, and you know, this is the time for one task, and another, now I have to clean, and there's this, and manage all of that. For these people, they're more imaginative, and everything flows into the other, so kind of like they lose a sense of time also. They can be very dreamy, you know, and sometimes, you know, they can be very late to things, because they don't have that can be the more negative side. They don't have a sense of time. But anyway, that's besides the point. I was saying that, you know, because I have this like spiritual way of doing things, and things come to me, you know, when rather than having a set time, which is also required, but I don't, you know, like how it's said in society that, you know, it's all about actions and overdoing actions. But you know, for a spiritual guide, it's a little bit different. Like, they work with surrender, and it's kind of like when something is given to you, then you know that then you have to take it out into the world and put it as action. So it's this deep level of surrender. But anyway, I was going through a phase where I wasn't creating that much, and they had a problem understanding. Like, they would like ask me, so what do you do, you know, like, but what are you doing the whole day? And if I said, you know, that yeah, this and this is what I did, and they were like, you know, that's it, but then what did you actually do, you know, what are the, like, I went to I created a song, and then I went and I did some of my tech work, and then I went to the gym. But but you know, whereas my schedule is quite different, like everything just flows into the other. And they would ask things like, so what, you just like all day just sit and stare at the wall, like what exactly do you do? You know. And so they can have problems in the beginning, like when they're young as well, you know, to understand this. But then that is the side that they develop, and often they will attract partners as well, you know, who will bring that side out. Like when I met this person, they brought out my more practical side, and for them I was bringing out their more you know, imaginative side, and the fact that you know, the relaxation is also important. And that's when all of these mundane things that we do make sense as well. Otherwise they can get too monotonous, and we lose the sense of meaning for them, and it gets, you know, feels like drudgery or something. And just to give you an example, you know, someone well known who has this position is the painter Vincent van Gogh. And you know, his paintings are very famous, of course. And if you like, some of the very famous paintings that come to mind to me, you know, when I hear his name, are like that Starry Night painting, where it's all very surreal, and like the stars are blending in waves, and you know, with the actual sea, with the buildings, like it's all flowing together. And that's how that is what the 12th house in Pisces is all about, you know, where everything blends into the other. And that is something that they need to learn as well, you know, in their life, how we all belong in each other, whether that's, you know, through their charitable work and working in organizations, or whether that's understanding their emotions, or whether that's the art of surrendering and just allowing the day to just flow, you know, as it comes, and surrendering to the moment rather than needing specific tasks all the time, and, you know, having like a busy mind. So all of these things will be helpful to you in this life, and this axis to me of the 6th house and the 12th house is the axis of service. You know, like I explained before in this video, one side is the more practical service that we do through our physical actions, and the other is you know, belonging in each other and having that understanding, the more like emotional feeling based, you know. And when you combine the two, you can get these people who are very you know, like if they work in the field of art, then they're very creative, imaginative people who are also then able to create, you know, structure from that imagination, and you know, build anything like a movie, you know, a script, or be these amazing actors, or it can be a person who is in service, you know, who works with charities, or who works for the planet in some way, or works for the underprivileged is very big with this position as well. But you become somebody who's not just like lost in these spiritual dimensions. You are also very practical and able to carry out tasks, but you, at the same time, you're not somebody who's just busy and doing all of these tasks, but there's no like higher meaning behind it. And you know, it really just combines the two worlds together and makes for somebody who can show up that way without any ego, and just with this beautiful surrender, as this highest possible servant on the planet, you know. And because my brother has this axis, and one side of this axis, you know, has to do with giving structure and order to things, you know, the practical side, whereas the other side is everything blending into each other, you know, all of us feeling like we belong in each other and having that understanding and surrendering to chaos, surrendering to the fact that you know, things don't always have to be orderly as well, and there is kind of like, it has its own you know, significance. There's a significance to it as well. So when you combine both, so for example, my brother is dealing with that as well in his life, because he works, you know, he delved into a few NGOs, these non-government organizations, and things aren't so structured there that what he's used to, for example, you know, like for working with corporate companies. So part of his work, you know, and part of his mission, and what he feels is about bringing order there, you know, that okay, now I'm working for something that has like a higher vision, and the heart is in the right place, but also there needs to be order that's brought there. So these people can combine both, you know, this order that comes from the more physical side of life, and also this belonging in each other and everything flowing into each other, and they bring the best of both worlds. Like when you know, what if you consciously work with this axis, that is the potential to bring the best of both and serve in this highest possible way that, you know, a human can. And if you are a creative person, you know, let's say you write scripts, or you are a director, producer, something like that, then you're bringing the worlds of imagination that you have, you know, that where again, like, it's all imagination, it's all the subtle realms, and you're bringing that into form, into conception, into something you know, that people can tangibly view or hold, and again, you know, that's combining the two. So I hope that, you know, this was helpful to you. Let me know in the comments below if this is your experience, what kind of challenges you have with this position, and what kind of talents you have, or any other questions that you might have.